All right, hello everyone. I'm starting live videos to expand the platforms that I use to communicate to parties, especially since we've had issues with Twitter in the past week. So I thought it would be prudent to make an effort to use more platforms and encourage competitors. And also I think the broadcast is very good. It allows me to communicate with the kind of emphasis that text just doesn't provide. So I suppose, given the fact that we have been suspended from Twitter in the past few days, and that is pending appeal, so we'll see what happens, but given that that has occurred, I thought the best thing would be to discuss free speech. We've had not only the Twitter suspension, but we've also had a couple of articles this past week which have been negative towards us, mostly stemming from the Gulf News, and also the National followed suit and so on. So we've had some UAE media that's against us. Hi Nathan, hi Mohammed, Rafaela. Some negative media, and I was actually asked today by a client I was on the phone to, what about the Gulf News article? Is that going to impact negatively your ability to represent us or help us with this Interpol case? And of course the answer is no. I should be thankful that the only thing I really have to fear is a Gulf News article. If I were in the UAE, like Ahmed Mansour, I'd probably be in the CID headquarters right now, potentially being tortured. However, what we have at the moment is a little targeted attack from the UAE. And as I've said in writing, that it's been something that's been escalating over the past couple of months. We've been engaged in some very active... Sorry, is that working? Phone call. We've been engaged in a couple of lawsuits in the US and also the UK that have been very controversial, let's say. They're involving one of the rulers again. So that's also caused some severe attempts to attack us in formats that we haven't had in the past. So this Gulf News article anyway was created accusing us that we had essentially created fake news regarding Darren Crawford, who was an Emirates flight attendant. We said that she had suffered tonsillitis, and that information had come direct from Darren. So the Gulf News reported that that was fake news and that the Emirates is wonderful. Why would I say that? But as we all know, around 2 years ago, we also had the news of Princess Latifah, who had escaped. Latifah, the first thing that UAE did when Latifah's information was published is they tried to circulate disinformation to the journalists. So they tried to say that we had been propagating fake news, that actually Latifah didn't even exist, or if she did, it was this other sister over here who you can see in public. So there was this sort of campaign, and that's been going on for quite a while. It took around 3 months for that to fully be exposed and admitted by the UAE and accepted by the United Nations. But this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. I think when it comes to saying that, or trying to circulate anyway in the UAE media that we are propagating fake news, is an attempt to erase 12 years or more, actually, 12 years and so many cases of injustice, of public cases that have gone public and really damaged the UAE's credibility. And a lot of them are the tourist cases that really seem to impact the UAE. And rather than actually addressing the issues, changing the laws and, protecting the expats and protecting the tourists from these violations, they think that perhaps the Band-Aid solution is to discredit me, to discredit the cases that we're dealing with, because they hope that that's obviously going to change people's perception of cases from the past. So that's going to help with some people who already live there and who haven't experienced these kind of abuses firsthand. And it's certainly going to encourage the sort of patriotism from Emiratis. However, the international community is not buying it. So I think what we'd like to see is less focus on discrediting an organisation who's advocating for change, not because we don't like the UAE. The UAE has the potential to be a fantastic country if only they would make these changes that protect people from abuse, and that's all it is. The kind of bias that people experience over there as well, it's, being able to make allegations, criminal complaints and leading to people's arrest without any evidence. This is the kind of rogue behaviour that makes the country so unsafe. And I'm still not seeing anything changing in that respect. So, Gulf News, yes, okay, thank you for your interest, but we are not really concerned about what the UAE-controlled media has to say. Journalists who are in the UAE, British journalists, have expressed that they are very upset about having to stay in that environment, essentially, because it's entirely controlled. They can only say what the government wants them to say. They're propaganda houses. And if anyone says anything negative, they're going to be deported. And that's whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a journalist. So I would like to see some credible media actually investigate the allegations that have occurred in Gulf News. The other thing circulating is that we have been suspended from Twitter because of fake news. No, sorry, that's again just rumours perpetuated by adversaries. There's other rumours that we've been suspended for hate crimes. No, we haven't. It looks like we're subject to some sort of mass reporting for posting perhaps the same thing from my personal account and from the Detained in Dubai account. It's hardly the biggest offence, and frankly I think it's shameful that they would suspend an account so without any kind of hearing or warning. I think it's very irresponsible. So I'm happy to support other platforms, and I'm really enjoying this, so I hope to use it more often. And hi, Paul, PJ, Mohammed, Valerie. Valerie is fantastic. Her husband, Robert, we were able to help. He was detained abroad on the basis of an Interpol red notice that has come from the UAE wrongfully. And there's just so many of these. We're dealing with them all the time. And it's one thing I'm very passionate about. The first one that I helped with on the Interpol was in, I think it was 2008 actually, and it was completely different back then. I thought, well, I'm going to try this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll try it anyway. I took my client down to a local police station in London and said, right, here's my Interpol fugitive. We're submitting to your jurisdiction and you can arrest him if you like. But if you don't arrest him, then he's obviously not a fugitive anymore, so you can advocate for his release or his the deletion of his notice. And that actually worked back then, so I would escort clients in that way, and then Interpol decided to make things more complicated. So now we're looking at a 9-month time span from the time we take on a case to the time that they're actually deleted. And in Valerie's case, and thanks for joining, Valerie, in Valerie's case, extradition proceedings were undertaken, which caused her husband to be arrested and detained. And at the end of this, it was found to be a civil matter, not a criminal matter at all, and he should never have been arrested in the first place. So what we're advocating for now is some compensation for victims, because this is something that's been going on for a long time without any change and without responsibility from Interpol. So back to, I suppose, the free speech element. I think we all need to value that a lot more than we do. I think that when we see things like Facebook or Twitter and they're giving the reports of what's fake news and what's not, whether it's coronavirus or anything else, I think we have to be really, really careful with that, because like we've seen with Twitter, if someone like the UAE reports, if 100 of them get together and report to Twitter that what I've been saying is fake news, and look, they've got a Gulf article to back it up, we're going to see Twitter possibly siding with them just because they've got an article. Okay, it's not a reputable source, it's a UAE newspaper. We're going to see Twitter actually taking that seriously and thinking that the news that we provide is fake. And most of the time, they don't seek to validate. It doesn't go to court. A simple complaint is enough. So I think it's really a responsibility of ours to ensure that these platforms continue to be more balanced, fair, and that there are procedures in place to stop this kind of harassment that can occur. And these forums have really, a lot of activists, a lot of Gulf activists in particular, have been seriously targeted by companies, by governments in Saudi and Bahrain, in Iran and the UAE and Qatar. They pay hundreds of thousands a month to lobbyists to, particularly do this kind of thing, to shut down articles that expose them, and to pay pay newspapers, essentially. I mean, the Qatar, I know, has quite a huge stake in British newspapers, as does the UAE. And this is influencing the kind of content that's out there. Is really interesting to see The Guardian, The Independent, and the different styles, and you can actually see who has a vested interest in certain topics. So, again, we have to be careful of the content we're reading. But I think for now anyway, I'll end this here. Thank you very much. I'm going to be doing this on a very regular basis, and hope you have a good night.